Hello to all CINEMASTER lovers. Hope you enjoy watching. Let's get started. The series. The Institute begins in a strange room in an unknown building where we see two workers carrying the corpse of a little girl and throwing her into a crematorium to get rid of her. Then we go back in time to the city of Minneapolis with Luke, who is taking an exam at university. We learn that he is a genius kid when it comes to math, observation, and data analysis. Luke finishes the exam in record time, so much so that the other students can't believe he finished so quickly, especially when they find out he's only 14 years old. At that time, Officer Tim is at the airport and decides to cancel his trip to New York because of a problem with the plane. He decides to go back to his city to get away from the headache in New York and forget the problem he had at work. He gets in a car with a local woman who gives him a ride on her way. At night, Luke tells his mom and dad that he wants to enroll in an IT institute to pursue what he loves and be successful in life, but they don't agree with his idea. He gets upset with them and focuses on the tray in front of him, and suddenly the tray moves from its place and falls to the ground. We find out that Luke has a supernatural power and can move objects remotely, but he can't control his power, which only appears when he's angry or scared. When Luke returns to his room, a scary-looking black car arrives in front of the house. One of the people in it, named Michelle, says they have 45 minutes to finish their mission. They get out of the car and break into Luke's house. Luke senses movement around him, opens his eyes, and is shocked to see Michelle spraying him with anesthetic, causing him to lose consciousness. The next day, Tim arrives in the city and learns that the police are looking for a new night guard. He applies for the job and meets Chief John Arrows. We learn that Tim is a famous and skilled police officer, but has been suffering from psychological problems for a while because he killed a 16-year-old boy. Even though the boy had a gun and was a threat to him, Tim still feels guilty, which made him leave the police and all of New York. Tim easily gets the new job, and at the same time, Luke wakes up to find himself in a room almost identical to his own. But when he leaves, he finds himself in a strange building monitored by cameras everywhere. He meets Kalisha, who tells him they are in a place called the Institute, which gathers gifted children like them. She explains that the children are divided into two types: those who can move objects remotely, called TKS, and those who can read minds, called TPS. She is one of the mind readers. Luke is shocked and can't understand what he's doing there or why he was kidnapped until she tells him he's been recruited, not kidnapped, and his mission is to save the world from destruction and wars. Meanwhile, three people are monitoring them on cameras: Julia, the director of the Institute, Trevor, the head of security, and Dr. Daniel, who is responsible for the children's tests. Julia is very impressed with Luke's intelligence and decides to meet him personally. Tim starts his new job and meets his colleague Wendy, who he seems to like at first sight. Wendy shows him the places he'll patrol at night, and his job is to make sure the whole city is safe. Trevor comes to get Luke, and as they're entering the elevator, Luke sees the girl who kidnapped him, but Trevor prevents him from talking to her. They reach Julia's office, and she explains Luke's mission at the Institute. She tells him he'll undergo some experiments aimed at saving the world, and that he must follow the rules to finish the experiment and return home. She promises that at the end, she'll erase his memory and return him to his family. At night, Tim walks around to check on the city's situation and meets an old woman named Annie, obsessed with conspiracy theories, convinced that some people control the world, and that the government is monitoring them and has planted listening devices in their teeth. Tim feels sorry for her and thinks she's crazy. Meanwhile, Michelle from the organization sees a car approaching the gate from the other side. The guard stops the car, which contains a small family, and tells the father to turn back, lying that the Institute is a lab for infectious diseases and no one is allowed near the place. At night, Luke meets the cleaning lady, Ma. They are running experiments on them, and Tony comes to inform Loki to get ready so he can do his first experiment today. At that time, he meets Tim at the hotel where he is staying and learns from him that Wendy called him several times in the morning, but he didn't want to wake him so as not to disturb him. Tim thanks him and rushes to the police station, where he learns that two criminals are on their way to the city and that she wanted to warn him about them because they are very dangerous. Avery goes with Luke to buy some cookies from the vending machine. Avery controls Luke's mind and makes him buy licorice cookies even though he hates licorice. Luke is amazed by his intelligence and supernatural ability and feels pain because he wants to escape the Institute and end his suffering. Tim goes to the bar and meets Kate, who introduces herself as a journalist. He asks her if she knows anything about the Institute. She replies that there are many theories about it, like they experiment on aliens or make bombs and weapons. But in reality, no one has been able to prove anything. He tells her about Annie and lets her know that Annie suspected the Institute of kidnapping little children. Suddenly, he hears news on TV about the plane accident Annie talked about, and he tells Kate that Annie predicted this accident before it happened. The next day, Luke tells Nick that he watched the guards at night and noticed they work in 2 shifts, 6 hours apart, and that if they want to escape, their best time would be between 1 and 1:30. At that time, Avery controls the mind of the guard dog and sees the Institute's backyard and realizes there is an old, rusty fence they could escape through. Luke is very happy and calls Avery a genius, saying this will be their plan to escape the Institute. Afterward, Kalisha comes and tells them she entered the dream box and is devastated animated as she recounts seeing her worst nightmares in the box. They all support her to overcome it and then celebrate the time she spent with them. Julia calls it a graduation party because Kalisha is moving to the back section. The children hold hands and create a mind link between the 5 of them so Avery can enter Kalisha's mind and see the back section when she goes there. The guards take Kalisha to the back section. Avery sees her entering a dark, scary tunnel until she reaches the back section, and then he loses contact with her mind because there is interference blocking his psychic power. At night, Tim is in the city streets and goes to check on Annie but finds her dead in her tent with an empty liquor bottle beside her. He assumes she died from an alcohol overdose. The next day, 3 new children arrive at the institute, the twins Gerda and Greta, and a boy named Harry. Harry is very angry, scared, and wants to know exactly where he is. Avery tries to explain, but Harry hits him. Nick gets angry and stops him, telling him they are all kidnapped like him and are ready to answer all his questions if he calms down. They go down to the garden to talk. We learn that the institute does special experiments on twins to make them enhance each other's abilities, which is why Gerda and Greta were kidnapped. Luke explains everything to Harry and asks him not to be afraid and to listen to them if he wants to leave safely. He hints that they are planning to escape, and until then, they must cooperate with the staff so no one suspects them. He tells Harry to think about football to forget he's kidnapped. Avery is shocked and asks Luke how he knew Harry likes football. Luke admits he saw colored dots and discovered he has both telekinesis and telepathy, but didn't tell anyone so they wouldn't move him to the back section and he could buy more time for their escape plan. At the police station, Tim suggests to the chief to send Annie's body to the morgue to find out the cause of death because he's sure she didn't die from an overdose. But John refuses because the morgue fees are over $3,000. Tim gets angry and decides to investigate the case himself. Luke goes to the test room for the new experiment and is shocked that he will enter the dream box so soon, even though he's only been at the institute for less than 3 days. Daniel tells him he's a special child and is confident he'll come out fine. He injects him with the serum again. Luke starts to feel tightness again, sees colored dots everywhere, and witnesses events from the future he didn't know about. We learn he's the only one who can see these events. At night, Tim goes to Annie's tent to investigate her murder. He finds old newspapers about accidents in the city and suspects Annie knew about these incidents before they happened, but no one believed her and thought she was crazy. He finds a small box in the tent with Annie's fingerprints, unlike the liquor bottle that killed her, which has no prints. Avery grabs Luke's hand and transfers their consciousness to the back section of the institute, where they see Kalisha and the other children. Kalisha is the only one who can see and talk to them. She starts explaining the back section, showing them the movie hall, and says anyone who enters that hall comes out brain dead. They see Chris, who is so brain dead that she puts out her cigarette in the popcorn, is always lost in thought, doesn't talk or move, as if she's a statue. Avery then sees the infirmary, and as soon as he approaches it, he hears the buzzing sound. At the institute, Julia learns what happened to Michelle and gets very upset because she is short on staff, and she is especially annoyed with Trevor because he works behind her back and hired Kate, keeping her monitoring Michelle for 3 months. Trevor assures her that his goal is to serve the institute, and it's clear that they both hate each other very much. Trevor thinks he deserves her position because his mentor is the one who got her there. They then call the organization's boss, who is an unknown person, and inform him of all the latest developments at the institute and what happened with Michelle. He blames them for not knowing how to choose employees and asks Julia to solve the problem and fix her mess, then ends the call. Julia then tells Trevor to appoint Kate as head of the abduction team to kidnap new children for them. Loki goes with Tony to undergo his first experiment. He sits on the same chair and wires are attached to his head to read his brain signals. Dr. Daniel tells him he will see small dots after being injected with the serum, and all he has to do is notify him when he sees those dots. He asks him to use his abilities and lift the toolbox from the table. Loki tries but fails the first time, so Tony injects him with another dose to boost his abilities. Indeed, Loki is then able to lift the box in the air without touching it. After the experiment succeeds, Loki goes to play snakes and ladders with Nikki, and they think about a plan to escape the institute. But the first problem they face is the surveillance cameras, and they don't know how to disable them without a jamming device. Loki suggests to Nick that they lure one of the staff to help them escape and insists that it remain a secret between them, and that they act quickly because no one stays more than 2 weeks in the institute's front section. They need a child from the TP group who can take over people's minds. At night, Tim talks to Wendy and asks her about Annie because he saw her in the morning fighting with a woman named Sloane in the city. She tells him that Sloane is her daughter who drowned in 2008 at a place called the Red Stairs. Unlike everyone else, Annie believed that the girl and her friends didn't drown, but that the institute killed them. Annie claims she has supernatural abilities, can read minds, and see things from the future. We learn then that Tim's mother died of dementia, which is why he sympathizes with Annie, as she reminds him of his mother. The next day, Loki sees the room of the new child coming to the institute, so he goes to his friends and tells them that the room is for a very young child. He's excited to see him and find out what his abilities are. He learns then that George succeeded in most experiments, and the last one he did was called the Dream Box, exams, which he managed to pass. His supernatural power developed to the point where he could control the coin in the vending machine without even seeing it. Later, Tim is at the supermarket and meets Dubera, the owner, and learns he's a migrant from Mogadishu who came here because of the war in his country. At night, Tim is at work as usual and goes to check on Annie, who is living in a small tent on the street. While talking to her, he hears gunshots, so he quickly runs to the market and sees the thieves Wendy warned him about. Before he can do anything, the thieves shoot at him and flee, but he isn't hurt. He rushes to Dubera to help him, bandages his wound to stop the bleeding until the ambulance arrives. When his colleague Drew comes, he asks him to call the ambulance quickly and orders all units to stop the thieves' car. At the organization, Julia is in her office recording a message for her father's birthday. Afterwards, she looks out the window and is surprised to see Daniel and Trevor talking together. Trevor asks Daniel to choose one of the children to develop his abilities and make him a clairvoyant, then sell him to a rich investor. Back to Tim. When the ambulance arrives, his boss is happy with him and sees him as a hero because he managed to save Dubera. He asks for the report to submit to the unit as soon as possible and tells him that Dubera wouldn't have survived if Tim hadn't stopped the bleeding. At that moment, Loki sees the new child, whose name is Avery, and he's very scared and wants to go back to his mother. Suddenly, Kalisha feels a strange power coming from him, as if he was controlling her mind. She tells Nikki and Loki about her feeling, and they're both very happy because this is their chance to escape the Institute. The next day, Loki goes with Tony for the new experiment and sits on the same chair again. Daniel injects him with the serum, and Loki starts feeling short of breath and confused. Daniel asks him to notify him if he sees the colored dots, but Loki is very scared and struggles to swallow. Tony brings a small screen and puts it in front of his eyes, asking him to focus on it to see the dots. Whenever Loki moves his head away, Tony forces him to focus, until Loki finally sees a group of colored dots on the screen. We learn that these dots are in his mind and no one else can see them. Loki lies to them and doesn't tell them he saw the dots. Daniel comes and asks him about the drawing on the paper, but Daniel hasn't seen the drawing, so Loki says anything that comes to his mind. Tony gets angry and shocks him so he doesn't lie. After a while, they return him to his room to rest, but Loki breaks down from the torture he is subjected to, and it's clear he's bleeding from his nose, but he doesn't care. At that moment, Tim goes to the police station. There, Wendy asks him about the report and tells him that Drew didn't mention his name in the report, even though he was the one who saved the shop owner. Tim tells her he doesn't want people to see him as a hero and wants to avoid the fuss and headache because he still hasn't gotten over the incident with the child who died. At the organization, Avery starts reading the minds of all the children and tells them that Loki likes Kalisha but she likes Nikki, and Nikki isn't interested. The three of them feel embarrassed and don't know how to respond, but they are impressed by his supernatural abilities. After a while, Maureen goes up to Julia's office, and Julia warns her to stay away from Avery because he might read her thoughts and discover the crimes being committed at the Institute. Back to Avery, he's sitting with his friends when he suddenly zones out and appears to be in contact with Annie, although he doesn't know her, and it's the first time he's seen her. The only connection between them is their similar mental abilities. Suddenly, they all hear a terrifying buzzing sound they can't bear and don't know the source of. Julia sees on the surveillance cameras Daniel and Trevor talking and realizes they are plotting something behind her back, so she turns on the audio recording and learns that they are planning to sell Loki after developing his abilities. His supernatural abilities made Patak decide to call the boss and tell him everything, so he would expel Trevor from the Institute. But the boss assures her that Trevor is suspicious of her too, and that he won't listen to any of them until he finds evidence from either side to prove their accusations against each other. While she's talking to the boss, she keeps hurting her hands because she enjoys torturing herself. At night, Tim is wandering the city streets as usual and goes to check on Annie. He finds out from her that she heard the buzzing sound she always hears from the Institute, but this time it was much stronger, and she doesn't know why. She warns him that she saw a vision of a plane carrying an important person named Ramsey crashing while flying, and she is sure the Institute is behind the plane accident. But Tim doesn't care about what she says and tells her to rest, forget about it, and drink something to calm her nerves. He suggests she see a psychiatrist, but she refuses because she doesn't want to take drugs or sedatives since they cloud her mind. She tells him she stopped drinking alcohol years ago to keep her mind clear, but it's stronger than ever, so he and Luke return to the front section. We then see Julia burning her hand with a lighter while watching the surveillance cameras. She finds out Daniel did the Dreambox experiment on Luke without her permission, gets very angry, and decides to monitor him. A little later, Julia talks to Luke alone and tries to find out what happened yesterday in the test room, but he refuses to tell her and plays on her nerves to see if she suspects Daniel and Trevor. Julia snaps at him and asks him to trust her because she's not his enemy, then leaves and enters the Institute. Luke follows follows her and meets Maureen, trying to get information from her about the institute. He learns that Maureen had a son named Jacob, but he died. Since she was little, she has hated the institute because of the torture the children are subjected to. Luke feels this is his chance to use Maureen to help him escape from the institute. He goes to Tim Lundy and asks her to help him solve Annie's case. He asks if she had seen Annie before without lipstick and shows her the can and the liquor bottle. She notices the difference between them, especially since the liquor bottle is expensive for Annie, who lives in a tent on the street. Both of them suspect that Annie was actually murdered, and they suspect the institute is the reason for her death. And here, the movie ends. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more new videos. See you next time.